Hello friends, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 41 of Monster, and oh my god, Grimmer! I love Grimmer. I did not think at this point in the series we would be getting introduced to a new character that would be so dynamic and so fascinating as Grimmer. I want him to live a long time, and so I probably jinxed him to die like in this episode. But I really like Grimmer a lot. He's very similar to Tinma, but he seems like he's like if Tinma went through the ringer and came out okay, and now he's telling Tinma about it. He's like almost like a future version of Tinma come back to be like, hey, it's gonna be okay. We all have to do some things sometimes. You're gonna make it through. You can still be a doctor, but I'm not gonna lie. I said this in the last reaction. Like, Tinma's going through some stuff right now. He's really sad that he killed Roberto, and so he's going through a lot of stuff. And he knows he still has to. In his mind, he believes that he still has to go after Johan. And Grimmer's kind of like, hey, don't be a sad sack, buck up. And so Grimmer's like this ray of positivity that I kind of wanted. and I feel like Tinma needed. So I'm hoping, I wanted him to stay with Tinma longer, but no such luck. But Grimmer is in Prague, and he's on a mission to find some shit out. I'm like, if anything, I hope Grimmer gives us some exposition and we get some stuff out of this, because that would be really great. The sad thing is that Tinma is not going to know this exposition unless Grimmer meets back up with him and tells him. So what do we do? But the only comment I have is from way back in episode 16, because I had way back in episode 16, it seems like a lifetime ago, that I was asking about how Johan got his name based on the storybook. I'm like, oh, he must have got it from the storybook. But Moon points out that in episode 16, Wolf actually claims that he gave him the name Johan when he showed up at Kinderheim. So what is it, right? I mean, is it the world's biggest coincidence that Johan got his name from a guy named Wolf at Kinderheim and it just happened to match the book he probably read as a kid? Who knows? Is the trauma that him and Nina went through in Prague triggered by this book? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see, right? But I'm really excited for this episode because I want to know more about Grimmer and his interrogation of the Kinderheim director. I want to know if that's going to go anywhere. They're probably not going to show it to us. They're probably just going to be like, oh, here's a moment, and then you're going to be like, but yes, I woke up this morning, I poured myself a cup of coffee, and I said, Monster. Yes, let's do this. And that's where we are. So I'm ready to watch with you all. So we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right into this. But before we do, I want to give a quick shout out over to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon to thank all of you patrons and all of you subscribers on YouTube for being so supportive and kind. And the philanthropy tier get a shout out in my videos, and they get to break ties if we have them in the polls on top of all the other Patreon perks. So with that being said, thank you all so much to these kind patrons who are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much to Edgar, to Dana, to Be Happy, to Shimoyama, to Alex Cornejo, to Kiri, to Nameless Monster, to Natalia Zaharia, to Modern Amethyst, to Librarian of Lang, to Kiri, to Tyrone, to Anime Annie, to Eric, to Kubalutek, to Sunspots, Translucent Men, as well as the Goddess Anna, and I think Eric. Thank you all so much for your kind support. I truly, truly appreciate it. All of my love. But yeah, we're not going to waste any more time now. We're going to dive right in and see what we get. I'm so excited. So we're going to start Monster, episode 41. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's do this, y'all. Oh my gosh, this episode. Oh, I don't feel the need to bring out whiteboard cue for this because I think most of it is just talking about Grimmer and the ghosts of Kinderheim. Oh my god, and the idea of being wrong about something. And I am as guilty as Grimmer because I thought that director, that Petrov, was doing something horrendous when really, nope, he was just running an orphanage. He was basically repenting, and then this mystery woman came in and killed him and Anna. Oh my god. So it's one of those situations where you watch the whole episode, and at the beginning you have this very clear-cut idea of what you think about somebody, and then by the end when it all comes out in the wash, you're like, wait a minute. I feel the worst for the kids in this episode because the kids are now without the kind man that took them in. he's now without him and Anna. And so these orphans that were, I feel bad because I feel like now this traumatic incident that Grimmer unwittingly caused is going to affect them for the worst. And I'm like, no, I'm like, will they be able to find like someone else to take care of them? And I'm like, Grimmer, I love Grimmer's character so much, but he just basically screwed the pooch in this episode. And I'm like, no, my God. Grimmer is so fascinating. Grimmer is such a fascinating character because he is like, he's basically the interrogation style of, I'm going to be like a gnat on you and just wear you down with a kind smile. I'm going to wear you down until you confess, until you give me what I want. And it's this idea of, well, at what cost? Like by the end of this episode, Grimmer gets what he wants, but at what cost? Like he gets the information that he wants about Kinderheim from Petrov, but at the cost of basically abandoning and orphaning a dozen kids and putting them in the same situation that they were in Kinderheim now, right? Where they're displaced, abandoned, and the one system that they had as a setup is now destroyed. And we'll talk about that when he's out in the soccer field with them. But this episode had so much going on in it, so much, and just little psychological things. It was so fascinating. I really love Grimmer as a character. I think he's fascinating. His interrogation style is like if Rudy was more persistent. I would love Grimmer and Rudy to meet. Like if Grimmer and Gillen met, I would really love that because I feel like I would want to see a conversation between the psychiatrist and this freelance journalist. Grimmer has so much mystery behind him because I'm like, why do you care so much about this case? Why does this particular case, why is it something you want to know more than anything? What's the deal? And I think it's because his son was in Kinderheim. I think his son was in Kinderheim and was killed by Johann. That's what I think. I think he was, because why would you care so much? And he talks about like the bonds between parents and their children. And we established in the last episode that sometimes children of spies were sent to Kinderheim. So if his kid got taken in and sent there while he was away on a journalist mission from East Berlin, then what do we do? So it wasn't just kids from Prague that ended up in Kinderheim. It was kids in Germany that were the sons of spies and criminals and such. So if his kid got apprehended and taken to Kinderheim and was involved in these brainwashing experiments, then of course he would, Grimmer would have a stake in this. And I feel like he does have a stake. Something is up. Grimmer has some kind of personal investment in this case, and that's why he's so persistent with it, right? And I feel like once he finds out about Johann, hopefully he does next episode, then he's going to want to reconnect with Tinma and be like, okay, here, I found a tape about the kid you're talking about. Yeah, he's a piece of work. We need to do something about that, But I don't know. Maybe this will affect Grimmer. The idea that you can't judge something by the idea that someone's past. We just got done talking about this in the last episode where Grimmer was telling Tinma, being like, well, you're still a doctor. Even if you've done something horrible, you can still be a doctor. You can still do good. And here, we kind of see it flipped a little bit, where you have someone like Petrov who, and I know his name is Reinhard Herman, but I'm going to call him Petrov because it's shorter and easier to say. But you have someone like Petrov who had a very dark past, seemingly, and was involved in these seemingly horrible experiments. We'll talk about that. But then now he's doing something good, and it's the question of, is that possible? Can you do something horrible in the past and then reform yourself and do something good in the future? I mean, that's what he was doing. So, and I think that that's something that's an interesting thing for the mangaka to bring up, because I know that we have like a big point of concern, at least in my country, is the idea of like reformation. And when people are incarcerated and they come out, like the stigma against those people of, oh, you were in jail, you were incarcerated for something bad. How can you be good in society now? And more than often, those people that were incarcerated, they get out there, like they want to do good. I mean, obviously there's still people that go against that, and create the stereotype, but there are lots of people, I mean, I've encountered them through work, I've encountered them through teaching, that have been in jail and they get out and they're like, no, I realized I made a dumb mistake, like when I was a kid, I want to reform and do better. I'm obviously a different person than I was back then. And it's the idea that you're a different person than you were before based on your experiences. So that idea of changing because of experience is something that kind of follows a lot of characters in these stories. Like Tinma is changing because of his experience. Nina is changing because of her experience. Petrov is an example. And Grimmer just like wears him down. And you know, now it makes sense. Now, going back and realizing it all full circle in this episode, it makes sense why Petrov was so terrified when Grimmer shows up, because Grimmer is literally a ghost from his past. Petrov's like, I got out, I'm making a new life, I got a new name, I'm trying to do right, and then this person shows up that questions all of the darkness that had seeped into my past, and I want him to just go away. I want him to just leave. Now, the question is about the guys that come to the hotel. Now that I think about it, were they going to shoot Grimmer, or were they just going to beat him up and get him out of there? That's the question, right? That is the question. Because they didn't have guns. They didn't shoot him from the window. They didn't try to do anything. They just burst into the room. So I'm like, did Petrov just hire them to scare him, or did somebody else hire the guys? That's the question. We don't know now that we know that Petrov was not really, and just wanted him to go away and leave him alone and quit bothering him. Now that we know that, it's like, were those two guys that showed up at the hotel, were they hired by Petrov, or were they hired by somebody else? And we don't know the answer to that question. I'm assuming they were hired by Petrov, but they didn't shoot at him. They didn't seem like they had guns. They were just there to rough him up and get him out of there and scare him into leaving. And honestly, I feel like Petrov, if he did hire those guys, was expecting, he was probably expecting Grimmer to be able to get away. But he was probably thinking Grimmer would get the hint that, oh, somebody's after me, I'm going to leave. But no, Grimmer is, if all things, persistent. And the sad thing is, he's persistent to a fault. He's persistent to the point where it actually causes damage. And it's like, I love Grimmer's character. But by the end of this episode, I was like, you just caused these orphans to lose the one security net they had. And now this government agency is probably not going to do them any good. They're probably all going to get separated. And you probably have done more psychological damage to them than anything. They just had to witness a woman with her head shot in, and their one, a symbol of parental authority get completely, just killed. And they're probably going to be negatively affected by it. And they probably will blame you. And they're not wrong to. It's like, But here's the thing. The thing about it is it Grimmer's fault that Petrov is dead? It's not. This woman showed up out of the blue that has seemingly no tie to Grimmer and just showed up and killed Anna and him. What? Just out of the blue showed up and killed them both. Why? What is happening? What is going on? It looked like Nina from the onset, but I'm like, could it be their mom? I mean, she may not have aged very much. She may just look really young. Because I'm like, is the mom the one that's after them? How does she know? What's the deal? Because I'm like, I was trying to think, Nina was with Dieter, so did she just, it's weird. Why would she leave Dieter, go to Prague, to go after, obviously they determined, the thing of it is, they don't know where Tinma is. Tinma showed up to meet Carl, but Tinma didn't tell Nina or Gillen or anybody he was meeting Carl to go to Prague, to get information to go to Prague. He didn't know that. All Nina knows is that the book reminds her of 3 frogs, and maybe, no, Schubert was the one that said something about the bridge. So all Nina knows is that the book makes her feel weird, and there's a mention of 3 frogs. That's all we know. And that her and Dieter were going after Tinma, right? But if they're going after Tinma, why would she care? Why would she want to find Petrov? How did she know about him? What's going on? So it couldn't have been her. Surely it was maybe it was their mom. But why would their mom, unless their mom saw Petrov with Grimmer and was like, oh, you're not going to give information about Johan out, are you? And then got rid of him. But then why does that doesn't make sense either. So it's just like this mystery of who was this? Dang it. And we know that Nina had on the vest and the shorts and stuff. So I don't know. Maybe she changed clothes. But I don't think it's Nina. I think that that's a red herring. I think her showing up and looking like Nina is supposed to make us think that it's her. But why would Nina kill him? She has literally no reason to kill him. She would want the information just like Grimmer, right? If anything, she would want the information on Johann, so why kill him? Something's amiss. I smell a skunk. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. I'm just like, what? How? So yeah, then we go through the intro. Get through this intro. Get out of here. The ghost of 511. It's so interesting. The use of shadows, the use of reflections in the mirrors and the windows, it's all really well done. And Petrov looks terrified the entire time because this is his nightmare. He's like, I've actually come here to make a life for myself, and now my ghosts are following me. Grimmer is the ghost of 511 that's haunting him. Like, it just keeps bringing things up about his past that he would rather not talk about. And so we find out he was a psychologist and a psychiatrist. He was both of them, right? And so he says, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, your specialty was scientific personality management. In other words, brainwashing. And the crazy thing is, Grimmer is so like upbeat and peppy while he's interrogating. He just like begs you to tell him things because you're just like, it's creepy. It's very creepy. I love Grimmer for it, but it's a very creepy interrogation style that is surprisingly effective because he's not mad. He doesn't ever seem mad. He only gets mad a few times in this, right? And that's when he feels like the kids are being threatened. And so that's when he gets mad. But I'm not saying that Petrov is completely free of guilt. I mean, he was working at Kinderheim, and he does kind of admit at some point in the episode, he does admit, he's like, yeah, I was doing experiments on kids, but isn't all education experiments? And I'm like, okay, get all vague in general on us, why don't you? But I'm not going to absolve Petrov of all guilt because he was involved in an institution that was well known for abusing kids and supposedly brainwashing them, right? So I can't say that he's absolved of all sins, but I do agree with Grimmer's conclusion he reaches by the end of this, that he was trying, at least at this point in time in the Czech Republic, to do good. He was trying now to kind of like do right by these orphans that were left behind at the border. And I believe him. I believe that they were left behind by prostitutes and that they didn't have anywhere to go and he took them in. I totally believe that. It does, you think on the outside, it's very easy to think, oh, you're just doing Kinderheim 511 part due. But I do believe Petrov by the end that he wasn't trying to do that. That wasn't his goal. He was trying to do right? And give these kids a sense of love. What is interesting is that you could make the comparison that what Petrov was doing is similar to Johann in the sense that we see Johann hanging out with all the kids playing around. But here's the thing. There is a clear delineation because Petrov, we know by the end of this, was fostering like senses of love and happiness and understanding with these kids, and that was his experiment. His experiment was like, let's do it right this time. Johann is telling kids to play chicken on a roof and possibly kill one another, and that it's fine to be nihilistic and dark and support the evil empire and overlords. Like, Johann's kind of fostering these chaotic and slightly disturbing ideologies in these kids, where we don't quite get that with Petrov. Now, we're not around the kids long enough to know if any of those kids have those ideologies. We don't know. We just see like the bare bones on the outside. But I will say Johann's a little bit more manipulative from what we've seen, a little bit more dark and manipulative with the kids than Petrov was. Just by what we've seen. Now again, seen barely hardly anything. It is very creepy though, when the kid opened up the door for Grimmer, and it just felt like Dieter all over again. And I was like, oh my God. Like, it just felt like Dieter all over again. And I was like, oh shit. So yeah, it was very creepy to see like these kids in similar situations. He's like, if you're just raising kids, there should be somebody more qualified than you. And again, Petrov's like, go home. You don't know anything. Leave me alone. Like, he doesn't, the only time he threatens Grimmer and swings at him, old man's got some moves. He's like, I want the records of the experiments at Kinderheim. And when he asks if the mission was a success or not, that's when he gets mad. He says, you're a scholar, so this data and research is more important than your life. I want you to show me the documents. And he's like, no, I don't know anything. And when he asks if it was a success, is it fun using people like marionettes? That's when he swings at him. Not when he says, was it a success or a failure? Because he knows it was a success. he says, is it fun using people like marionettes? And I feel like he swings at Grimmer because that's what Johann did with them. Once Johann got there and kind of took over, he used everybody like marionettes and made them kill one another. And Petrov's like, you have no freaking idea what went down, so don't even ask. You don't even know. This swing was like a you don't even know moment. But the fact that Grimmer takes that hit and has no negative reaction and just takes it and goes, Grimmer's been through some shit. And I get the impression that Grimmer's maybe been tortured before, that Grimmer has been under enemy lines, he knows how to work the system. Grimmer has been, as a freelance journalist or as a spy, he's been under some pretty daunting situations. But I just feel like he has a personal stake in this whole thing. His kid was involved, because the fact that he's so, like, just very clinical about, oh, my kid's dead. That's a case of you have to be clinical to get through it. That's one of those situations where it's like the taste of sugar. If you've lost it, like the two biggest losses you can have is the loss of a spouse or a child. I mean, your loss of your parents right up there, but I would argue like the loss of your spouse, the loss of your child are two of the most impactful things that could happen in your life, alongside losing like a family member or parent. And for Grimmer, the only way he can get by and not have like an emotional breakdown is if he treats his son's death as very clinical and just like, no, my kid's dead. And we're just not going to talk about it. But I feel like that personal stake he has and that fuels, and maybe he doesn't have any, personal investment in Kinderheim. Maybe his kid wasn't involved at all, but it's the fact that he loved his son, he loved kids, and knowing that these children have been brainwashed, it could be that one of the kids from Kinderheim killed his son. That could be it. It could be that his kid is not in Kinderheim, but it could be one of the patients from Kinderheim killed his kid. And so he's like, why did this happen? He wants to know why. And that's led him on this goose chase. So I don't know. But the fact that he just takes that swing to the face, doesn't bat an eye, and is like, was the experiment a success? I like that there's the moth to the flame. He's like, in 1985, it was destroyed in a fire. Which was 3 years after he said he went to Japan, or told Timma that, right? So, interesting. And he brought his kid back the toy. According to the rumors, the children massacred each other. And Petrov's thing is like, I wasn't the director then. I was no longer involved in Kinderheim in that manner. I wasn't there. But Grimmer's like, but you got out. You were still there. So you still had a stake in it. So, I mean, again, I'm not going to resolve Petrov of all sins because, yeah, he was involved in Kinderheim. He may not have been the director, but he had a say in what went down, or he could have expressed a voice, but he kept his head low and got out, right? But I do think it's horrifically tragic when you realize that he was trying to do good this time around and help these kids. And it's like, oof. Oof, we just did a big old goof. But again, Grimmer is not responsible, as far as we know, for getting him killed. This woman just showed up and attacked them. For all we know, it's probably good that the kids weren't there. Or maybe if the kids had been there, he wouldn't have gotten killed. We don't know. So he's like, when you were in charge, everything went well. So he's like, you're stepping on dangerous ground. I'm not responsible for what happens to you. And I think that, I honestly think Petrov's trying to be like, get out, quit prying, don't get into this. This stuff is messed up. It's connected to Johann, who's messed up. You're gonna get hurt if you keep following me. Like, leave now, right? Turn back while you still can. I feel like that's the situation, right? And Grimmer's like, why would I do that? It's like, ah! So, yeah, I for a long time in the episode, I thought Grimmer was gonna get hurt. Grimmer is such a good character, and I'm like, is Grimmer gonna die? But I think now he's gonna be like, now Grimmer's not only gonna be tied to wanting to figure out the Kinderheim thing, he's gonna want to figure out, okay, wait, why was Petrov killed? Who killed him? Who's trying to silence him from giving me information? Right? I'm gonna hang around until I get the truth from you. And he's like, get lost! He's like, leave! He's like, don't show yourself in front of me ever again. And so then, and the kids in the shadows. Oh my God, the use of shadows in this. The kids in the shadows. Oh my God, it's so good. And honestly, I think Petrov was trying to tell him, like, maybe Petrov was trying not to draw attention to himself And the fact that somebody like Grimmer was following him was just drawing attention. And he's like, I don't want to be seen. I don't want people to know that I'm here. And then he gets discovered and people go after him. I think that it very well could be that Johan's mom killed him because she found out what was going on. And he's like, he spends his life around his grandchildren, even though he did such awful things to children in the past. And it's so fascinating to see that judgment that's there, right? Like, Grimmer judges him so hard, even though Petrov's like, I wasn't the one brainwashing the kids, supposedly. And we don't even know, right? And even me talking about it here, it's hard to distance Petrov. Petrov says he was innocent, and when he did things, it wasn't like that. But when Johan showed up, things changed. And it's hard to believe it, right? It's hard to believe it because you know all the bad stuff that happened to Kinderheim, so it's hard to separate that from him. And so even me watching this episode, I'm like, it's hard for me to feel bad for Petrov until the very end when you find out he was actually trying to do something good, and then he ends up dying anyway. I do like that we get Grimmer sleeps without his socks on and his feet out. And then he gets dressed pretty damn quick. They're like, a message. He's like, oh, hold on. And he just goes. Okay, they didn't pull out any guns, but yeah, he's like, corner rooms have such a bad view, but they're pretty convenient in situations like this. He took that corner room knowing that there was a chance somebody could come after him. Look at him. And he got dressed super, super quickly. Like, yeah, Grimmer's been through the ringer before. He knows how all this works. I love his character so much. And then he's like, I was in a dangerous situation this morning. Some strange men came to my hotel room. And the thing about it is, we think that Petrov sent those men to the hotel room, but we don't know. We have no clue. It could be somebody else is watching Grimmer, watching Petrov, and sent them to stop pestering him to find the truth. We have no idea. That's the crazy thing, is that we don't know for sure. Because it's not, this episode makes it to very much to where the mangaka is saying, you cannot judge anything at this point. From this point on, you can't judge anyone or anything until the truth comes out. Until you have the concrete evidence, you cannot assume anything. And I'm like, because I assumed so much about Petrov in this episode, and then it was proven wrong. And I was like, oh, and I feel like Grimmer, like, well, shit. It's all came out in the wash. But yeah, and him with all, he's like, I was in a newspaper in East Germany. I couldn't have imagined a life like this. And when Grimmer says, I'm a freelance journalist now, he's basically telling Petrov, being like, I'm not bound by any official regulations. So I'm just here on my own accord. So I'll do whatever I want, and you can't scare me away because I'm not bound by any jurisdiction, is what he's trying to tell him. Like, just to say, like, oh, I'm just doing my own thing now. It's fine. And he's like, I'm free. Yep. Yeah, I couldn't imagine what it was like under socialism. He's like, I could just follow you forever. And Petrov's like, I wish you'd leave. Yep. And he's like, I saw your house, everything. Like, he threatens him. Like, the thing about it is that Grimmer threatens him so much in this moment. Just being like, I know where you live. I saw your house. I could go back and find it. Like, if you don't tell me what I want. Like, he's so sweet. It's like sugar. He's like so saccharine in his interrogation. But it's just like, it's Grimmer. He's just like, I could get what I want from you if you don't tell me things. And Petrov's like, he's like, leave me alone. He's like, don't ask me how I got my money. And then, yeah. And Grimmer, of course, realizes that they're different kids. And he thinks that, oh my God, he's doing the same thing over again. And the weird thing is, when he goes back to Grimmer's apartment, it looks like Hartman's. It looks like the one that Dieter was from, right? Right? It looks exactly the same on the outside. And then you get inside and it's different. There's not pictures of kids on the wall. There's actually there's drawings and stuff, and they're playing cards. It is the creepiest thing though in this apartment. I'm not gonna lie. It is the creepiest thing how quiet the children are. I mean, when he walks in, they all just are quiet, and he's like, I'm here for Petrov. And they all just watch him. I honestly thought, until we figure out that he actually is running a decent orphanage, I thought that Grimmer was going to get in there and all those kids were going to pull out knives and stab him. I really thought they were going to kill him. I thought the kids were just going to kill him and that was going to be it. Because they're so quiet, it puts you on edge. In the U.S., kids that age are not quiet. They don't just sit there quietly playing cards, and they don't just creepily turn like children of the corn and stare at somebody walking in without saying anything. Kids aren't like that here. No. They're really loud and obnoxious. So I was like, I was a little worried for Grimmer when the kids all just kind of turned and stared at him, and he was like, oh, hey, kids. I was pretty freaked out. I thought they were going to kill him. I thought that Petrov was going to like snap his fingers when he came in. They were all just going to like swarm him like zombies. That's where my brain went. But no, thankfully that didn't happen. But he realizes, he's like, it's the same experiment. And that shot of him like in the midst of all those kids is crazy. And then Petrov says at the German border, there's a place with many prostitutes, and these boys were born there. Many children were abandoned in the midst of all the poverty. I would say, though, old man, you didn't take in any girls, I noticed. No ladies were taken in. I guess that's because he's a guy and he doesn't want to worry about that, and he doesn't want to deal with, like, girls and hormones and things like that. Maybe trying to give him the sexist, anti-sexist benefit of the doubt. But it just so happens he's taking in these boys. So, of course, Grimmer's mind would assume that he's running Kinderheim all over again. He's like, this is... But, again... It's what he knows. Petrov knows about raising these boys from Kinderheim, so of course he would just do boys again. But it makes it look really suspicious. He's like, you wanted to continue the experiment from Kinderheim. And Petrov's like, why would I continue something that was a success? No. And then we see Anna, and he's like really kind to her about making dinner. And she's like, oh, sure. He's like, continue it. He's like, there's no need to do it again. The education program I applied was a success at molding personalities. And again, you can take that for what you will. He doesn't ever say like how it was molded. And this is where Grimmer gets mad. It's like the first time Grimmer's facade falls is when he's like, education. He's like, that was human experimentation. And then Petrov tries to get all philosophical, and he's like, well, isn't creating people that society demands called education? And I'm like, well, technically, yes. But, I mean, I guess technically, but most, in that regard, education is a broad net, right? So you don't just, it's not creating a one-size-fits-all person. It's cultivating people's skills in a certain area to the point where they can be beneficial to society. That's how I view education, because you have people that end up becoming veterinarians, people that become doctors, people that become scholars, people that become teachers, people that become artists, theater. I mean, like, you know, the way that Grimmer is viewing it is he's like, you were doing human experimentation for militaristic purposes, is what Grimmer is suggesting Kinderheim was doing. You were grooming boys to be soldiers, right? I would argue, at least the American education system, we're not grooming everybody to be soldiers. There's lots of theater majors out there. They are not soldiers. So no, I would disagree a little bit with Petrov being like, it is not a one-size-fit-all. I mean, if you're reasoning that society is demanding a multitude of people with different talents and it's cultivating their skills to a point where they can be helpful to society and advance it, that's the goal of education as far as I understand it. But I feel like Grimmer is saying, no, you can't say that. Kinderheim was not grooming people for fitting all niches of society. It was specifically grooming a certain mindset for a certain thing. So Grimmer's like, quit trying to make this broad when it's not, at least in Kinderheim's situation. And I just love how much taller he is than all these kids. And he's like, when you look at education, you look at whether it creates the people who are demanded. And yeah, but again, a broad net versus a narrow net, I think, is the argument here. Education is an experiment. And it is. Parenthood is an experiment. By the end of it, Petrov is like, no, fostering that relationship between a parent and a child is an experiment. It can go wrong. It can be a success or it can be a failure, one way or the other. And yeah, if you're going to look at it broadly, sure. And Grimmer, that's the first time he really breaks down. He's like, there was an active education system at 511 Kinderheim. And he says, from there, how can you say it so nonchalantly after doing such horrible things? And he's like, horrible things? What you did to the children. And he's like, that, don't talk to me like you know when you've only scratched the surface. I like that Petrov's like, don't talk about things you only know gossip about, right? I wish my dog and Huckleberry and Ruby would come in here instead of barking. There we go. Yeah. And then Grimmer's just like, what do you mean that I don't know? And he's like, what's with that look? And Grimmer just like, he steadies his fist. He steadies his fist and looks down at the kids. He's like, that experiment where children killed each other. And he's like, is that what the results of your experiment were? Like, so yeah, there's something personal. Like, was his kid one of the ones that died? I feel like maybe he could have been, right? I like that he steadies his fist, though. He doesn't have an emotional outbreak. He steadies it and gets back on track with the conversation. Grimmer's so interesting. And he says, I told you. Petrov says that happened after I was no longer the director there. It's like the program was taken over by an outside element. So Petrov is suggesting that once Johann showed up and Wolf got involved and Wolf took over, that he pieced out. Petrov is basically suggesting that once Johann showed up and things start getting dark and sinister, he was like, this is not what I signed up for. This is not why I came here. Bye. And let it be Wolf's program. Right? But Grimmer notes, he's like, an outside element, and he says darkness, nihilism, destructive urges, hatred. He's like, they were possessed by that after this boy arrived. He's like, the people who graduated from Kinderheim, they cannot love others. And he says that is an interesting point. So this begs the question, how does Grimmer know that? How does Grimmer know that they can't love others unless he's come in touch with those from Kinderheim? So again, either his son went to Kinderheim and was brainwashed, and Grimmer saw that he couldn't love anyone anymore, and he ended up dying. But that doesn't make sense, because if he saw him in Kinderheim before he died, he would have got him out of there, right? Or his son was killed by somebody from Kinderheim, and he interrogated the kid from Kinderheim, and that's when he realized that he couldn't love anyone. That's what I think it is. Either his kid was in Kinderheim and died, or his kid was killed by somebody from Kinderheim, and he wants to know why this happened. He wants to understand what it was. Because I don't think Grimmer's not out for revenge against Petrov necessarily, or Johann, at least not yet. But he just wants to know the truth. He just wants to understand, why did this happen? Why was my kid killed? What is going on? And to get to the bottom of it, right? That is the end of our conversation. And he tells him to leave. And this is where Grimmer threatens him. He's like, I'll have you arrested and these kids taken away if that's what you want, because you don't have approval to have an orphanage here. And Petrov's like, why are you trying to mess with something good? And that's when he decides, let's go out and play soccer. And again, he's like, let's go play soccer, kids. And they instantly light up. Like, man, if these kids are brainwashed to anything, it's loving soccer. Because Dieter loves it. They love it. It's like, if anything, these kids have been brainwashed to love football. That's the big thing. And he leaves him. And so then he goes out and he's like, he wants to make a deal with me. But for your sake, I don't care about the deal. When I tell the police you'll be free, don't you want to leave that house? And they're like, no. And then they go on playing and he's like, but you'll have more freedom outside. Hey, listen. And that's it. And they won't listen to him. And there's an interesting commentary about that, is when he tells them, he's like, hey, I'm going to get you kids freed from this, what he feels is an oppressive situation. Aren't you guys happy about that? And they're like, no. Because they like it there. They like how it is. And that says two things. One, it should say that they are not being abused by Petrov at that point. Because Dieter was happy to leave. Dieter was fine to leave his situation because he was getting abused. I don't think Petrov's abusing these boys. So it's a sign that, one, they're fine staying with him. He's not abusing them. But also, two, it makes kind of a note about society in general, that when you're comfortable in a situation, you don't mind being in it. You don't necessarily want change. So it's like, if you live in a societal situation where you're fine, everything's comfortable, yeah, you don't want that to change. Even when people point out the darkness of that society's past, you're just like, well, fine, but that's not affecting me right now, so we're good, right? It's a very much a commentary on that, right? That a lot of people don't want to own up to what the darkness of their situation's past, because right now they're comfortable. So it's a nice commentary on that. It's very interesting. And Grimmer's like, well, don't you just want to get to a better situation? But to them, they're like, no, this is fine. And then he's like, look out, mister, the ball. And when he trips over and falls, the kids all laugh at him. They're like, he's so bad. And they're all laughing and being happy about it. And Grimmer's like, well, how come they seem happy? Happy from the bottom of their hearts. I love, again, this damn show. The kids are pointing and laughing at him, and there's the shadows facing him. Like, just the use of shadows in this show is ridiculous. I love it. And that's when he realizes, oh my God, I've been wrong this whole time. He's been experimenting with his kids to try to get them to love things. And they're like, mister. And he runs back. And I love all the kids follow him with the soccer ball. He just leaves him and goes back. But he goes in through the back way, right? They're like, wait up, mister. Now he runs upstairs. And when the kids go out, then they see this woman walk by, right? And she walks by and has this dress on. She looks like Nina. And they're all distracted by her. She does look like Nina. They're like, such a pretty lady. And they're all distracted. But yeah, so... But I don't think it's Nina. I think we're meant to think that it is, but I don't think it's Nina. I think it's the mom. I think it's Johann's mother. Because why would Nina care? Why would Nina be there without Dieter? What's going on? And I don't think Nina, Nina struggled to shoot Johann, like, in the face, in the fire, when that was her whole mission. I don't think that Anna or Petrov would have threatened her with a gun, so why would she just point blank shoot them? I don't think so. No, I think it's all a misdirect. Yep, and somebody else has killed them. The saddest thing about this is the kids all surrounding Petrov, like crying about you saying you're bleeding, Grandpa. Like, that's just, the most tragic thing. And he says, a tape with an interview with that certain young boy while under the influence of drugs, talking about the past trials he endured. So they doped Johann up and got him to talk, like, with interrogation drugs. Oh my God. I mean, I want to hear the tapes. I want to hear all this. That's what we've been waiting for, is Johann backstory. But what the fudge? The monster who led Kinderheim 511 to destruction. Are these children missing anything? And yeah, and at that point, that's when Grimmer realizes he done goofed. He's like, no, you're using education on these children. He's like, I wanted to make people who would not be taken by the darkness. Do you know how to do that? And it's love. It really is a new discovery. It's not, he says that's just a natural thing to have between children and their parents is love. It's not some kind of weird thing. And he says it's an experiment. Oh my God. And then he dies. Man! So, I'm hopeful that he'll get the tape and can see stuff with Johann, but I'm worried about these kids. I worry about these kids more than anything. These kids just lost like the one decent person in their lives. The one decent couple was Anna and him, and now they're gone. So what are they gonna do? Why? So yeah. What do we do? I loved Grimmer this episode, but I felt bad by the end of it. I was like, oh, Grimmer, we goofed. We, the audience, thought that you were doing good, and you thought you were doing good, but we might have just... But I feel like it's not Grimmer's fault that Petrov got killed. Grimmer just happened to be here in this entire situation. And so maybe it's fate that Grimmer is there to get the information before Petrov was ousted. So I just feel bad for the kids, because now what's going to happen to them? Right? So what I am curious about is your thoughts down below about this episode. I love Grimmer's character. I'm super nervous and super excited to see what's going to happen with him. I hope we follow him a little bit longer. I hope we follow him as he learns what's on the tapes with Johann, and maybe we transition from him listening to the tapes with Johann to Tinma getting into Prague and trying to find the mom. Maybe. But we'll have to wait until next episode to find out. So, yeah. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Monster. Bye!